Today we're looking at the refreshed Carrera. This is the 4S and we're halfway through the model cycle. It takes about 7 years to get a full brand new Carrera. So we're halfway through, so this is the mid-cycle refresh, and it's a major one because it gets a new engine around the back. More on that in a moment. Aesthetically on the outside, not much has changed. You don't mess with a good thing. It's a good looking car. You'll notice that there's the 4-point LED daytime running lights embedded in the headlamps in this car. You'll also notice a light bar that runs between the right and the left rear turn signals, and that's on the all-wheel drive models. And also the rear of the all-wheel drive models is slightly wider by just over 40 millimeters to give it a more hunkered down look. Now, speaking of the suspension, this car now sits 10 millimeters lower than the old model, and if you get the optional PASM system, it drops it another 10 millimeters, and that's what you see on this car. 20 millimeters lower than the old car. It's sitting on beautiful 20-inch wheels and has a package that's worth over $7,000 that adds those features plus active rear steering and more. So we'll get into that when we drive it. As I mentioned, there's a new mill under the back, and you can see that. You'll notice it when you see the cars because the grille over top of the engine compartment has the slats running vertically and not horizontally. So we'll get to the engine in a moment. Inside there's some changes, and they're not all perfect. Now, the thing about the inside of a Carrera, it's always been about the driver. The older cars had horrible ergonomics with buttons and switches, but the seating position, the steering wheel, and looking out over the front has always been top-notch. That doesn't change with this mild refresh. The inside is as beautiful as ever. Absolutely gorgeous materials. Everything that you see here that looks like leather or aluminum is the real deal. This one has an upgraded GT steering wheel, and you now get the Sport Chronos package with a little knob here on the steering wheel. You turn it and that changes it from normal to sport, sport plus, and what have you. What you do notice right away though is the screen in the center here is now a flat glass screen, and it looks like to me like it's just been added in as an afterthought. It doesn't have a nice sort of metal frame around it. It looks good when it's lit up, but it also looks like it's an aftermarket unit that's been placed in a 991. So I think they could do a better job integrating that into the car, and it's not perfect. It's not a pure touchscreen, meaning that everything isn't done on the screen. You can see below you have all of these buttons for tuner, source, media, phone, navi, maps, what have you. So you have to push those buttons first to get into the sub-menu, and then you touch the screen, which does look dirty rather quickly. Instead of having a sort of a central controller, and there's a space right here where they could put something like that, and I think that would be better. Everybody else is going to the center controller. This is still touchscreen, and it's locked on me. After a phone call, it basically bricks for about a minute or so. You can't push any button or get any function to go after the phone call. It slowly starts to come back after about a minute. You get some of the functions back, and it takes another minute or so for all of the functions to come back. Also, the switches below brick as well after the phone call. So sure, this car might have an idiosyncrasy, but that's the problem with the newest and latest tech. Often there are glitches and you need a software update. So I don't mind the screen itself. The way it's embedded into the car, to me, looks kind of cheap, and it's not working perfectly. However, the engine is. So Porsche, living in a fuel efficiency and carbon reduction world, needed to reduce the amount of fuel these cars use. So a smaller flat six engine, it's 3 liters, but it's got 2 turbochargers attached to it. So they look at this as an opportunity. What has Porsche always done incredibly well? Turbocharged flat six engines. People pay the most money to get a 911 twin turbo. Now you've got a 911 twin turbo as your base car. Now, outputs vary depending on which model you get. I'm in the S. It's got a 20 horsepower gain over the previous engine without turbocharging, and torque is 368 pound-feet. Torque comes on, maximum torque, at 1700 RPM all the way to 5700 RPM, and this car makes a run to 100 kilometers an hour, 0.3 seconds faster than the old car. And the four-wheel drive or the all-wheel drive versions like this Carrera 4S are actually faster than the rear-wheel drive models, being able to get the power down, and the PDK-equipped cars are the fastest of the bunch. Now, you typically have to get the Sport Chronos package, which this car has, in order to get the maximum acceleration. So, are there any drawbacks to this? I have found driving in city situations, stop and go traffic, that this car, for the first 10 feet or so, before those turbochargers spool up, can feel a little bit flat. Once you get rolling though, it's all better. It's much, much better. On top of that, the new all-wheel drive system is electronically controlled straight out of the 911 twin turbo into this car, and it gives you the ability to run on just the rear wheels and send more torque to the front wheels when needed. Hey, Porsche Cayenne, how are you? And that's all good. So you have the ability to have more traction when you need it and sort of shut it off when you just want to be driving on a mountain road like this. On top of that, you can get the sort of active rear axle that turns a little bit. This car has it, but it's a spendy option at almost $8,000. So yeah, am I enjoying this car? Hell yeah. Would I like one? You bet. Would I like this or the base car? Probably the S. I've always been a Carrera guy that gets the S model, but it's a wonderful advancement and a major refresh for a mid-cycle facelifted car. So that's all good stuff. There's always going to be people that say, I want naturally aspirated flat six. I want the last of those flat six engines, just the way people wanted the last of the air-cooled 911s, just the way that people wanted the last flat six of the Boxster and the Cayman. But until you drive these cars, you might have sort of apprehensions. Once you drive them, you come to realize that Porsche knows how to make a pretty fantastic sports car. And this, in my opinion, is the best sports car in the world. It can do everything. It can go to the grocery store, you can take little kids to soccer practice, and you can beat the hell out of it on the racetrack and drive it home. Now, whenever I review a Porsche, I always love to bring out the price sheet because it's shocking, really, how much these cars cost. 126 grand is the starting price. If you've ever owned a Porsche or wanted to buy a Porsche, everything is on top of that. That 20mm drop in the suspension for the PASM is about $1,000. But the GT package that you get with the rear steering axle is $7,700. That gets the active rear axle. It gets you some interior features like the steering wheel and what have you, but $7,700 is a lot. And the total on this car, the way you see it here, let me scroll down, is $152,000. Now, that is a lot of money, but I want to point out that Porsche can demand these prices because it is the #1 brand when it comes to an aspirational purchase. You could have any kind of money and go and buy your favorite car. It's sitting right here. It's a 911. It's the #1 aspirational brand. It's #1 when it comes to things like initial quality and dependability. They build a fantastic product. It delivers on all fronts, and this new 3-liter turbocharged engine is dynamite. In the city, that first 10 feet away from a light, there's a little bit of turbo lag, but when you get it out on a road like I have today in the mountains, it just dances. It does everything beautifully. So they can charge because they know people will pay. It really helps if you can subscribe and hit the like button. If you want to watch a review of the all-new Audi S5, click the picture on the left.